In this video, I'm going to share a really mind-blowing insight that I've had from reading Steve Taylor's Spiritual Science. You can see my custom bookmark that my partner got me, that I'm making good use of. This was a huge insight that I had reading Steve's book. I'm aware that it was mentioned in The Leap, a previous book that I've not yet read. I'm about a fifth of the way through this book, and in the beginning, Steve explains the materialist worldview. He explains why that is a worldview and a belief system, and some of the foundations in science, some of the discoveries in science that not only set that trend at a certain point in our history and allowed for us to internalize this as a belief that is unquestioned, a truth that we take for granted, right, about the nature of reality. Steve also shows how science in modern times, and bear in mind I am not that far through, he shows how there's more and more an increasing body of evidence against the materialist worldview, what's sometimes called the reductionist materialism. That is when there's a belief that science as a objective measuring device of the material will be able to answer all the kind of questions about reality. In a way, it will be able to really get into the substratum of existence and find out all there is to know based on quite a mechanical view of reality. Within describing that, Steve talks about indigenous cultures and the way that they experience oneness with the earth and with the wider world more as a default setting, right? Now, in the Western world, our default setting is the ego. It's the conceptual framework that we have, the sense of separation that so many of us are trying so hard to overcome. So many of us are working with tools such as meditation to move beyond this mental activity, to experience the elixir of oneness, to experience those enchanted moments. Now, a great question that I've toyed with a lot, and it's something that's always been kind of rattling around my brain, is why is it that we forget who we truly are, right? Like, why is it that we enter this manifestation not knowing of our own divinity, not knowing of our own connection to God? Why is that? Why would God, or at least a kind of cosmic intelligence, a universal intelligence and consciousness, why would that be the case? And that's something that's plagued me. I've had conversations with many people about this, and there are lots of theories of kind of soul agreements and soul missions and kind of an agreement to enter this realm and to forget. And I believe, at least to my best understanding, that there is a truth in that we don't necessarily remember past lives or future lives or kind of things outside of this linear experience. And there is a period of remembrance on that level that is part of the spiritual awakening. But the insight, and I don't know, maybe this is something that you've already considered, but for me it just felt it landed in such an activating way, and I love Steve's style of writing. The insight was that all of these great traditions, Advaita Vedanta, Buddhism, Hinduism, all the wisdom in the Upanishads, right? The wisdom of the Buddha, the wisdom of the Tao, the wisdom of mystical Christianity, the wisdom of the Kabbalah, the wisdom of all these traditions that are teaching people how to awaken, is based on the underlying understanding of the ego. Right? If you think about it, even in Buddha's time, in Patanjali's time, the time that the Upanishads were written, with this wonderful guidance of how to kind of get over ourselves, how to still the mind, that was a time when humans had developed an ego, right? We'd already developed an ego. Now Steve's wonderful description of this, and the way that he articulates this experience is that the indigenous experience of oneness, where our connection to the earth and the divine isn't questioned, it just is. There's no idea of separation. That at some point we kind of rechanneled our energy into the intellect and the ego, which has allowed for great technological advancements. It's allowed for real enhanced capacity of that type of intelligence, but the energy that has gone towards that in the evolution of the brain that's become increasingly complex has led to a choice point of attention. We have to then dim our experience of the wider phenomena by being caught up in mind, by having so much mental activity, by kind of being in the logical, being in the problem-solving kind of mindset. So when you look at psychedelics and the default setting that dissipates, that's the part of the brain that is active most of the time, that gives us a sense of self, a kind of point of reference. When that goes offline, people experience oneness, and at the same time, if you look under a scan, a brain scan, you'll see that all the different parts of the brain are connected, right? So there's this channeling of energy into the intellect that is led to, and in cognitive science, you'll see this described as mental heuristics, right? Like the need to filter out so much information, because we're just bombarded with information, so we make mental shortcuts, and we almost live out a memory. This is something that I've mentioned a few times in my work. We live out a memory of the familiar, the known. Due to this filtering process, the day-to-day kind of autopilot, the state that we're in when we're not really questioning things, we're kind of moving from one thing to the next. We might be thinking about planning or replaying stuff from the past, this mirage of past and future that gets us stuck. This kind of avoids us making full contact with the present. So Steve's theory is that at this time, this process unfolded to create the ego, and it lost touch with a sense of oneness. But the real exhilarating thing, the thing that I love, because it reminds me of myself, it allows me to move deeper into that reality, that enchanted experience of oneness and mysticism and mystery, is that it's likely our ancestors, for the majority of the time, felt that way and experienced that way, could directly experience universal consciousness or the spiritual dimension. I think Steve calls it the pan spiritism, but it's this mechanism that creates the ego, and that's what we're unlearning from. So when we go back to 3,000 years to the Buddha's time, that process had already taken place. Now I know this sounds, it's obvious this is relevant to us, right? We've changed a lot, and psychologically I see there's great value in exploring the modern mind and looking at the ways that we have different unique challenges to that era, especially around technology and our devices and instant gratification and different ways that our dopamine receptors are impacted. But the point being, I wonder if 3,000 years before that there would have been no need for these teachings, right? Because it just was the way that it was. That was just how things were, and then this quirk of evolution, which I would speculate, and maybe Steve does at some point in this book, is that the ego development was necessary. It was almost kind of possible that we had to redirect that energy to advance the material realm, to get to that stage of intelligence, to do so. Maybe. Who knows? But what I love about this is, at least for me, I mean, this is a personal revelation, I'll go that far, is that it's a reminder. It's a reminder that this isn't the way we've always been. We've likely had, thousands of years of just experiencing oneness, experience the sentience, the aliveness, the communication, the divinity on our doorstep. And it's only in very recent times that we've kind of pivoted from that. And that's what we're undoing. That, I hope, is as inspiring as it is for you as it is for me, because it makes me feel like, you know, the ego can feel so formidable. But if we remember that it's such a small part of our history, and that we have to integrate everything we've learned, we have to integrate the power of the intellect and the mind, and we have to integrate civilization as it is now in a way that is healthy. But it imbues this sentience, it imbues the oneness into modern developments that we've made. I hope that you've enjoyed this insight. I'm really, really excited. I'm going to be talking to Steve Taylor on the podcast soon, so do keep your eyes and ears open for that. Thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. If you're on Instagram, please do follow me. Yeah, thank you very much for watching. I'll be back soon.